Hello, fellow historians. This video lecture concerns the KKK and the Jim Crow era. The Ku Klux Klan and Jim Crow. First, before we get into the KKK and Jim Crow, I want to offer up this Mississippi Black Code. The Black Codes were passed in several southern states, ex-Confederate states, directly following the Civil War. And what they represent are a series of laws that seek to place newly freed African Americans who were slaves before the war ended in April 1865, and the passage of the 13th Amendment, which outlawed slavery once and for all in the United States. And what they represent are southern states attempting to place African Americans back into very defined niches of oppression and subservience. Mississippi had the harshest Black codes, and this one that I want to offer up for examination is called the Vagrancy Code. Now let's read it together, and I want you to critically think about what we're reading. What type of society does Mississippi envision for its future directly following the Civil War? How do leaders in Mississippi view newly freed African Americans? What role do they envision, do white leaders in Mississippi envision for African Americans? What are they afraid of? Remember, there are 4 million African Americans who were freed following the Civil War. Put yourself in the shoes of a white landowner who's lost everything, whose family has owned slaves for 200, 300 years, 200 years. All of your life, all of your father's life, all of your grandfather's life, and your great-grandmother's life, lived in societies where Blacks were subservient, where white people ruled. You grew up taking for granted that you are the superior race. All of a sudden, these people who you enslaved, who your family has enslaved for generations, are now free. How do you think these white people are feeling? I think they're afraid. I think they have anxiety, right? They look out their window, they see African Americans walking around free. They're probably horrified. And so they institute, I say they, several states, ex-Confederate states, institute these laws to attempt to place Black people back in a type of bondage, even though slavery is outlawed in the United States by the North. The South pushes back, right? Every time the North attempts to pass legislation to grant some sort of equality to African Americans following the Civil War, Southern states push back. They don't want it. They don't want to give African Americans equality. And the North is pushing this. It's forcing the South to recreate itself in its own image. And the South is saying, no, we are not going to take it. We believe in white supremacy. See, even though the Civil War is over, it doesn't mean that everything's solved, right? I think when we're studying dates and we're studying for tests and we're reading textbooks, okay, this is over, now this starts. And in our head, it's perhaps we think it's done with, right? But no, this is a deeply ingrained idea, cultural trait in Southern culture, white supremacy. That doesn't mean it's not in the North. It is. There's different dynamics in the North. We have the seeds of equality in the North, right? The Supreme Court is passing legislation. The North is dealing with it. in various ways. Of course, there's race riots across the North as African Americans leave the South and look for jobs and compete with poor whites and working class whites for jobs. There's race riots for the next few decades even into the 20th century. But right now in the South is pushing back. Let's read this. And I'd like you to think about these things. Read the Vagrancy Law taken from the Mississippi Black Code, 1865. In 1865, at the close of the Civil War, the South was utterly defeated by the North, and in many places like Atlanta, in ruins. In one way, the Black Codes signify a new white South emerging from the smoldering fires of defeat to recreate society and culture fashioned after their vision for America, not the North's vision. What does the following Vagrancy Law tell us about how white leaders viewed freed Blacks in 1865? To what extent were freed Blacks truly free in a society passing such laws? Remember, the Civil War ended in April. It went from April 1861 to April 1865. The Black Codes were passed after the war ended. Where would nearly 4 million freed Blacks fit into the New South? What roles would they play? Where would they live and work and go to school? Think about these questions and other inquiries you may come up with when imagining what type of culture white leaders in the South wanted to recreate after their horrific defeat. Now, I'll read the first section and I'll leave it up to you to read the next sections. If you're taking my class, I'd like you to read the whole Vagrancy Law because these questions, I might form questions based on this Vagrancy Law. Section 1, be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Mississippi. Now, okay, stop. I want you to pay attention to every detail of this law and how wide of a net it casts. That all rogues and vagabonds, idle and dissipated persons, beggars, jugglers, or persons practicing unlawful games or plays, runaways, common drunkards, common night walkers, pilferers, lewd, wanton, or lascivious persons in speech or behavior, common railers and brawlers, persons who neglect their calling or employment. Keep in mind, I'll stop right there. Keep in mind, these are newly freed ex-slaves who are looking for work. And this law is saying someone who's unemployed. Most of these people are unemployed. This is an amazing law, right? That essentially makes you illegal if you're Black. Think about what this law is saying. I'll read this again. Persons who neglect their calling or employment, misspend what they earn. Misspend what they earn? Listen, up until I was in my 30s, I misspent my money wildly. So this is saying if you're 18, you're out of work, you're Black, if you misspend your money, you're going to go to jail. This is an amazing draconian law. Look up this word, draconian. This is draconian. Where did I leave off at? Or misspend what they earn, or do not provide for the support of themselves or their families or dependents. And now it's going to say, and everyone else, right? And all other idle and disorderly persons, including all who neglect all lawful business, or habitually misspend their time by frequenting houses of ill fame, gaming houses or tippling shops, shall be deemed and considered vagrants under the provisions of this act, and on conviction thereof shall be fined not exceeding $100. $100, let me tell you, we all know that $100 is a lot even to a poor person today. There are many people in Fresno, where I live, there are many people in Fresno who are poor who do not have $100 just to pay the courts. This would break them. $100 at this time, I'm just taking a guess, would have been around $2,000. Just someone who doesn't have a job or making pennies. Shall be fined not exceeding $100 with all accruing costs, and shall be imprisoned at the discretion of the court, not exceeding 10 days. Let me read on. This is just too good not to read. Section 2. Be it further enacted that all freedmen, free Negroes, and mulattoes. Remember, mulatto is someone who's mixed, half white, half black, like Thomas Jefferson's kids. And mulattoes in this state over the age of 18 years, found on the second Monday in January 1866 or thereafter, with no lawful employment or business, or found unlawfully assembling themselves together either in a day or nighttime, and all white persons so assembling with freedmen, free Negroes, or mulattoes, or usually associating with freedmen. Now, what is this section saying? If you are a free white man, you cannot have any freed African American friends. This law is outlawing the friendship between blacks and whites. This is after the Civil War ends. This is the South pushing back. Amazing law. So let's carry on. And all white persons so assembling with freedmen, free Negroes, or mulattoes, or usually associating with freedmen, free Negroes, or mulattoes, on terms of equality. Wow, look at this verse. On terms of equality. If you are a white man, a white teenager, and you befriend a black person, and you go around acting like you're equal, you're going to be in trouble with the law. Both of you are going to be in trouble with the law. Or usually associated with freedmen, free Negroes, and mulattoes on terms of equality or living in adultery or fornication. So this means you can't have white boys, you can't have a black girlfriend, right? It's outlawed. Free Negro, mulatto. And this is amazing. You know why this is amazing? Is because every slave owner, I can't say every, because slave owners had the power to rape and to have children with their black slaves. Thomas Jefferson did it. Many slave owners did it. Amazing law. Free Negro, mulatto shall be deemed vagrants, and on conviction thereof shall be fined in the sum of not exceeding, in the case of a freedman, free Negro, or mulatto, $150. And a white man, $200. So if you're a white man, or you're a white boy, a white teenager, and you have a friend who's a black person, if you're an 18-year-old, 25-year-old white man with a black free Negro woman you love, you're going to be fined $200. And that is a lot of money back then. It's a lot of money now, right? How many of you students can just whip out $200? This is a lot of money. Ask yourselves, what kind of society is the South envisioning? How is this different than slave days? In what ways is it different? In what ways is it similar? In some ways, it's harsher, right? Because these African Americans believe they're free. The North has just freed them. So there has to be lots of anxiety going on in these people's minds because they want to enjoy their freedom. They're free. The Union has freed them. But the South is saying, hey, you think you're free? Yeah, in name only. The North ain't going to tell us what to do. Get back in your place, boy. And this is what the South is saying to freed African Americans who want their freedom, who want land, who want to live their lives in honor and dignity, just like white people. Have their own land, have their own property, raise their kids, feed their kids, go to work. And the South is saying no. And okay, a white man, $200, and in prison at the discretion of the courts. The free Negro not exceeding 10 days, and the white man not exceeding 6 months. So I think most people, I'd say most people, it's hard to gauge what the common white man thought at this time after the Civil War. There would have been a lot of whites on the fence who could have gone either way. But because of these laws, there's a further separation of races. The elites do not want whites and blacks mixing at all, whether having children or just friendships. And they impose this very early on after the Civil War. And this continues until the 1960s, 100 years of this imposition of segregation and separation of races, an intense racist legalization of racism, and the permeation through society as people believe these things, right, and support the law, and attempting to keep blacks in a very defined niche below whites in society. Amazing law, isn't this? Vagrancy law. You can read the rest. It's all powerful. Amazing law. I want you to read it all. The KKK. Here's the first grand wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. And there are many aspects of the KKK we're not going to cover, but these are just the main aspects. His name was Nathan Bedford Forrest, a slave trader. And his statues and his bust were very recently still in the Tennessee State House, the Capitol. Over the last few months, they may have been removed. You can Google it, please, and look up Nathan Bedford Forrest, controversy statue. But his bust had been in the Tennessee State House ever since the end of the Civil War. Oh, actually, I can't say that. I'm not sure when the actual statue was put up, but very long time, decades. So he was the first grand wizard of the newly formed KKK. He owned and operated a slave market in downtown Memphis. He fought in the Civil War. He was a Civil War officer. And he, of course, intensely believed in white supremacy and that blacks should keep a subservient role in society below whites. Sorry, he was a general. He was a general in the Confederate Army. Here are early costumes of the KKK. And we're going to get to this in a couple of slides when the KKK accepted a uniformity of dress, a uniform, the white robe and the conical hats, coming in the early 20th century. Here are some early costumes. In 1868, the KKK boasted over 500,000 members across the South. Let me just backtrack. The KKK was formed directly following the Civil War, around the same time that the Mississippi Black Codes are being passed. It's formed in December 1865. Some historians say January 1866, and some historians say December 1865. I've seen it most often quoted as December 1865. The same month the Black Codes are passed. Right, the South is lashing back against the North. But in 1868, only 3 years after the Civil War, during the first stages of Reconstruction, as the North comes down to the South, the North divides the South into 5 military districts, and it occupies the South. Right? We often hear in the news how the U.S. Army occupies certain territories in the Middle East. Right? The North is occupying the South after the war and attempting to force the South to hold free elections, to allow African Americans to vote, to allow them to be voted into office as senators and congressmen, as governors. And for a brief moment in America, African Americans are voting, and African Americans are being voted into office in Washington. And for a brief moment, the Civil Rights Revolution almost happens 100 years before it actually happens. But there's a huge backlash. We call them redeemer governments. One by one, the South begins to redeem their states back from Black control, which of course they hate, right? Blacks do not belong in office, these white supremacists believe in the South. And the KKK is part of that redemption, redeeming the South for white people. But here, 3 years after the Civil War ends, the KKK has a lot of members across the South, 500,000. At its peak, during the second wave of the KKK, so there's three major waves. The first following the Civil War, the second in the 1920s, and the third in modern day America. We know now, I'm creating this lecture in 2020. And throughout America and throughout Europe, there's a huge resurgence of far-right extremist movements like the KKK. At this time, the KKK was the organization to join. Now there are many, and there are many KKKs across America who are not necessarily connected, but they're various versions of the KKK. But in the 1920s, there was a huge membership. A conservative number is, historians put it at 4 million. I've read historians proposing the number as high as 6 million. And I've recently, in my research, found an article from the New York Times from a few decades ago. I need to find it. But this article says that in the 1920s, KKK membership was at 8 million. That's a lot of people, right? And I'm giving this lecture in Fresno was a hotbed for KKK activity in California in 1924. Fresno, Long Beach, Bakersfield, Oakland were some of the major hotspots. Did I mention Anaheim? Long Beach, Anaheim, Bakersfield, Fresno, and Oakland were some of the major hotspots for Klan activity in the 1920s. Between 1870 and 1871, Congress passed the Enforcement Acts, which made it a crime to interfere with registration, voting, office holding, or jury service for Blacks. More than 5,000 people were indicted under these laws. A little more than 1,000 were convicted, and many of these were Klan leaders. So the federal government, during this time, during Reconstruction, actually takes the leaders of the Klan to court and places them in federal prison. And essentially, in some ways, the Klan is outlawed during this time. And the leaders are put in prison and they lose membership. And it goes underground. The Klan still exists after this, but it goes underground until its resurgence in the 1920s. In 1871, I should have read this first. In 1871, Congress also passed the Ku Klux Klan Act. Hundreds are jailed. Great, right? And it should have remained that way. This is my own opinion as an historian. Here's a question for you. Why is the Klan still allowed to exist in America? Why isn't it deemed a terrorist organization by the federal government? Why? Ask yourself that, if not as a student of history, as an American citizen. Why is the Klan allowed to exist? Another early Klan outfit. Looks a little like Santa Claus, but this is an early Klan outfit. Question. Why did the Klan form in 1865? What factors led to a small group of men, ex-Confederate soldiers, forming the Ku Klux Klan? Why do we study the Klan? Why do we study the Klan? Ask yourself that. Why is it important to know the history of the Klan in American history? What do you think? Why study this terrorist organization? What does it matter? All right. The KKK formed as a bulwark against the programs of the North, the 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment. In order to inflict, the KKK also, right, formed in order to inflict terror on the newly freed 4 million African Americans in the South, to impose violence so that white supremacy continued to be the foundation of Southern society, denying any of the freedoms passed by the North, namely the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, right? The outlawing of slavery, the right to vote, and equal protection under the law. Through intimidation, violence, and murder, the KKK terrorized Black communities for over 100 years. A very important date in American history, 1896, May 18th, 1896. The Supreme Court passes down this famous or infamous court decision in Plessy versus Ferguson. The United States Supreme Court established the separate but equal doctrine, holding that legal racial segregation does not violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Now, of course, by this time, the Civil War had already ended 30 years previously. And by this time, the South had already passed locally and at the state level laws that instituted segregation and oppression of African Americans. And so this just gives the South further justification in the way they treat their African American population. It legalizes it on a federal level, and the federal government tells the South essentially, okay, it's okay to segregate Blacks as long as you give them equal equality in services and in modes of living, equal schools, equal education, equal access to resources. But we know that this does not happen. This is a fairy tale. Does not happen, sadly. The Jim Crow era, 1877 to 1964. We won't get into details of why it's called the Jim Crow era. It's named after a minstrel show, a blackface show that was around the South during this time period. The Jim Crow era included a century of legalized structural racism in Southern states where laws were passed to place Black people in a perpetual base condition, forced into defined, constricted niches that supported a white supremacist society. From Virginia to Texas, former Confederate states created Jim Crow societies, denoted by the withholding of resources from Black communities, by placing restrictions on Black bodies in every sector of society, by supporting a twisted and unfair criminal justice system that targeted Blacks in much harsher ways than whites, and by enacting violence and murder against Black citizens. In May 18th, 1896, the Supreme Court passed down the Plessy versus Ferguson decision containing the landmark separate but equal doctrine, which established that legal racial segregation does not violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. By 1896, Southern states had already restricted Black people to a subservient position in society, but this separate but equal doctrine provided a foundational justification from the North that separation of the races was legal, so long as all aspects of living and being are equal. Well, equal never happened. Equality was put on the back burner until the civil rights revolution in the 1960s. And even then, the idea and state of being equal was and has been a debatable issue for many Americans. And here are a few pictures where we're fast forwarding in time from the late 19th century to the 20th century, of course, the last days of Jim Crow. And here are some photos of separate but equal. And I think most of us have seen the pictures of separate water fountains. And I've recently watched an interview of a Black African-American who was around during this time. And he said that the Black fountains never had cold water. Even in summertime, the water was hot. But of course, the white fountains were cooled. Horrible. So here's an African-American kid drinking out of a colored, and colored means for African-Americans, Blacks. And think about this. Every facility, every restaurant, every store, if there was a bathroom, they had to provide a separate bathroom for Black Americans. Think about how much money that cost to provide a duplicate of everything. The investment that the South had to make based on their racism. It boggles my mind, right? They're actually investing money. Here's a Negro waiting room. So this is at the Santa Fe Depot. This is at the train station, and Santa Fe had to build 2 waiting rooms. That's a lot more money across the board because whites do not want to sit in the same room as Blacks. Based on these laws, these cultural mores that go back to these Black codes, and of course even beyond that, right? Going back 200, 300 years in American history. So I'll read this out. Doctor, he's a doctor. This is a very intelligent, educated man. Dr. and Miss Charles Atkins of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and their sons, Edmund 10 and Charles 3, pause for a glance at the Santa Fe Depot segregation sign, 1955. Another one, right? For colored people. We wash for white people only. Colored waiting room. I like this. You see this middle sign. True story. Hitler's love life revealed. That's interesting little ad. All right. Access to resources is what holds African Americans back in the South. Access to resources is what allows white people throughout the nation's history to build wealth in equity, and the ability to pass on wealth to future generations is what builds wealth in America, right? Land, ownership of businesses, education, but Blacks are held back from entering into the storehouse of wealth and resources in America. Here, I'll read the caption. A teacher instructs a segregated class of Black students at a poorly funded one-room school in the backwoods of Georgia, 1941. Black citizens in the rear of the bus in compliance with South Carolina Segregation Law, 1956. Let's read some important dates. I won't read these all out because of time. Here are some important dates I would like you to know if you're in my class. December 1865, the KKK is born in Pulaski, Tennessee. 1896, in Plessy versus Ferguson, the United States Supreme Court established the separate but equal doctrine, holding that legal racial segregation does not violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. 1915, this is a very important date. The Birth of a Nation, the movie that I want you to watch. It's 3 hours long, but I want you to watch it. Take notes, take copious notes. Is screened to President Woodrow Wilson who was a Southerner. I believe he was born in Virginia, the Old South. At the White House, Wilson loves the film. In fact, this is the first film to be screened at the White House. I'll read 1919 out. Many whites, resentful of black demands for equality, attacked blacks. Chicago, Houston, Little Rock, Harlem, Washington, D.C., New York, Baltimore, New Orleans, and many other cities had outbreaks of rioting as whites attacked blacks throughout the United States. This period is called the Red Summer. 1924, 1925, this is the height of the KKK, the height of anti-immigration sentiment in America. Also, 1924 is the year the Border Patrol was created. And it's no coincidence that the Border Patrol and the KKK are formed in the same year at the height of anti-immigration sentiments. The KKK had 4 to 6 million members. And I mentioned earlier that one original source says 8 million. So between 4 and 8 million people. Even 4 million is a lot of people at this time in America. The population of America at this time is only 110 million. So the KKK had between 4 and 6 million members during its zenith in the early 1920s. Although it enjoyed considerable support in the South, the Klan was strongest in the Midwest and Southwest, and also California. On August 8th, 1825, 35,000 members of the Klan marched down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. In May 1924, approximately 50,000 Klan attend a week-long Klan gathering at Fresno Fairgrounds. Klan chapters from all over California participate. Here's a little note. During Reconstruction, the Republican Party in the South represented a coalition of blacks who made up the overwhelming majority of Republican voters in the region, along with carpetbaggers and scalawags, as white Republicans from the North and South respectively were known. These are some pretty powerful images. I often tell my classes, if we were in a setting where we were in an actual classroom, I often say, history is not, you're not going to receive happy history in my classroom. This is not a narrative of happy progress. Often history is filled with horrific events and barbarism and cruelty toward fellow men, humans. And this is a time period in America that's very dark. As nearly 4,000 black men, mostly men, of course there are women in there too, but mostly black men are lynched during the Jim Crow era. Here, I want you to know that I show these images with great respect, profound respect, and gravity, and empathy for these men and their families, their communities, and for African Americans who are still dealing with the legacy of this brutality in America. And so I don't show them lightly. Please don't think I do. These are powerful moving images that they're very important that we know they exist and they happened. The body of George Meadows, lynched near Pratt Mines in Jefferson County, Alabama, 1889. Bodies of 3 men lynched in Habersham County, Georgia, 1892. Look at this kid smiling, laughing. You know, I've seen a few of these images where it's mostly young people, young white people who are laughing, smiling, having a good time. You think about all the psychology that goes into that, right? How twisted their minds are growing up, thinking that this is appropriate or God-sanctioned behavior. Lynching of Jesse Washington in Waco, Texas, 1916. He was repeatedly lowered and raised onto a fire for about 2 hours. He was barbecued, right? A professional photographer took pictures of the lynching as it unfolded. He slowly died being barbecued, which, what words do you use to describe this? Demonic? I mean, I don't believe in demons, but if I did, I would say this is demonic. Horrific doesn't describe it, does it? And this is not the Middle Ages. This is not happening in ancient Rome or Greece. This happened very recently. This happened very recently in American history. It's no wonder that we're dealing with the repercussions still right now in 2020 with race relations in America, right? And that's not me taking a political stand. This is reality. There are repercussions throughout history. This is what historians study. Roots and repercussions, cause and effect throughout history. Lynching of Benny Simmons, soaked in coal oil before being set on fire. What a horrific, horrific way to die. I won't read this out because of time, but I want you to read it. This is Maya Angelou, on her original oral history testimony of growing up in the South and witnessing the KKK as a little girl. So please read this. Here's some numbers. This is the KKK at its height. They're marching on Washington, right, Pennsylvania Avenue, and they have their masks off. They are loud and proud in your face. We are the Klan, and we are showing our faces. So let's look at this membership roll. 1920, they're about 4 million. 1924, 6 million, between 6 and 8 million. Now that drops because I won't go into details, but the leaders are shamed. They're caught doing criminal activity, and they're brought to court, and the Klan loses favor in American culture to a great extent. At this height, 1924, many Americans see the Klan as a family organization. They are in parades across America. They are a patriot. I mean, I'm not saying this. Many Americans believe this, right? That they are a patriotic, God-fearing organization. You know, the Klan claims they're Christian. If you read the Bible, they are not Christian. I'm not a Christian, but I know what the Bible says. I've read it back to front, and the Klan does not match up with the teachings of Jesus at all. But many Americans in this time see them as a patriotic, God-fearing group, and they're vehemently anti-immigrants, anti-Catholic, anti-Mexican, anti-Black, of course, anti-Jewish. But this poses a problem in Fresno County or the Central Valley, right? Because Mexicans are wanted to pick the produce in the fields, so that the Klan really can't be all too much anti-Mexican in the valley, in Fresno County, in between Bakersfield and Stockton, because the farmers want Mexicans. And the 1924 immigration bill, Mexicans are purposely left out of the immigration bill because of a farmer interest in California. And Mexicans on their birth certificates are labeled as white because of this. So I'm Mexican American. I have never been considered white in my life by the law or by my community, but my birth certificate says I'm white. Fascinating, isn't it? The idea of whiteness also, and we're not going to cover that in this lecture, but the idea of whiteness in America is very fascinating, right? Because I'll just a side note. You can be a very dark European. Say you're from Sicily. And Sicily is one of the southern, I think it's the southernmost European area before you get to Africa. Many Sicilians are very dark, but because they're European, when they come to America, they're considered white. You can be a very dark-haired Sicilian and be white. And you can be a very light-skinned Spanish Mexican with green eyes and blonde hair, but because you're from Mexico, you're not white. But if you look at both their DNA, many Mexicans are more white than perhaps Sicilians who have lots of African blood. Interesting. Whiteness is very fascinating in America, right? And who is considered white, who is not considered white. Armenians in the early 20th century went to courts to be labeled white, and the court said, okay, you're white. Indians from India also went to court, and the court said, no, you're not white, your culture is way too different. But it was based on culture, not on how dark their skin was, to be labeled white. Fascinating, right? When the Irish first come to the United States, they're not considered white. They're dirty, they're tainted. After a couple of generations, they're assumed into white America. Fascinating. And here we see that the Klan loses favor and numbers dwindling throughout the 20th century until we get to, it starts to rise again in the late 70s and then 90s. It doesn't skyrocket, but at all, right? Compared to earlier numbers, just something 6,000 compared to 6 million. But then again, as I said before, during this time, there are other far right groups that are created besides the Klan. The population of the U.S. in 1924 was 114 million. Sorry, earlier I said 111, it's 114. 6 million Americans were active Klan members, which means that around 5% of all Americans were members of the KKK. Some estimates put the number at 8 million, which means that 7% of all Americans were donning white robes and believed in a racially pure America founded on white supremacy and the subordination of Black and brown peoples, Jews and Catholics, as well as others. 7% of all Americans. That's just the membership rolls. That's not counting the support that they receive in their communities, right? The cheers when they go down Main Street in the parades. Supporters, right? Here's a question. What fueled the rise of the second wave of KKK membership, starting in the second decade of the 20th century? Why do these numbers rise here? Because we know in the 1870s, right, early 1870s, the federal government took the leaders to court on the KKK Act, and then membership dwindles until we get to the 1920s. What happens right before the 20s that is a catalyst for Klan membership? What do you think? Sorry. The birth of a nation. Hollywood happens. Hollywood. So Thomas Dixon writes a book called The Klansman, and the Hollywood director W.D. Griffith reads it and makes it into the first Hollywood blockbuster. And this for cultural historians, this is the first time, or the first major time, that Hollywood had a profound impact upon American life, where American life mirrors Hollywood, so that art becomes reality. Here's some points. A Hollywood movie based on the book of the Klansman by Thomas Dixon Jr., who was a classmate of President Woodrow Wilson, both born in Virginia. It was released February 8th, 1915. Now, the birth of a nation is the catalyst for the second wave of the KKK. Hollywood provides the catalyst for Klan membership of the KKK. An epic film about the Civil War and Reconstruction depicted the KKK as valiant saviors of a post-war South ravaged by northern carpetbaggers and immoral free blacks. It was an instant blockbuster. Most Americans, though not all, loved it. It was innovative cinematography, one of Hollywood's foundational movies. It was the first film ever to be screened in the White House to President Woodrow Wilson, and he loved it. It helped rekindle the KKK, the second rise, the second wave of the Klan. Reality imitated art. The burning cross and the white robe uniform came from the film. And theater owners on opening night across America hired actors to dress in the style of KKK uniform depicted in the book, on horseback, going up and down the streets to attract viewers. We know now, right, at movie premieres, say DC and Marvel comes out with a new movie, and there are actors portraying those characters outside the movies. It's pretty cool, right? So these movie goers in certain cities across America got treated to Klansmen on horseback with fiery crosses. You're a white American. Imagine you're a white American. You're a poor Irish immigrant. You're a German immigrant. You're second generation. You're living in the slums. You're competing for jobs with African Americans who are leaving the South and coming to Chicago, Detroit, different places across America. And you see this film. These are heroes. They're like, these Klansmen are like Marvel comic heroes to these white people. This is what they are. They're heroes. People come out of this movie theater energized. I remember when I was a kid, I saw Star Wars in 1977. That's how old I am. I was 7 years old. I remember seeing Star Wars for the first time, and it was a religious conversion. Seeing Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, I was 7 years old. For the next 10 years of my life, I lived Star Wars every day. I breathed it. These are my heroes. I'm trying to imagine what these people felt when they saw this movie, right? This is why Klan membership skyrockets. They come out of this movie energized. These are heroes. These are these supermen to these poor white people. Not all whites, of course. Lots of white people across America see it for what it is, for what I think it is, right? It was dangerous. It caused further rift of the races, and depicted blacks in very horrible ways that wasn't true, right? Newly freed blacks after the Civil War wanted to just live their lives as anybody else would, to feed their families, to be good people, to go to church. And they were Christians, right? They went to church. They believed vehemently and intentionally in Jesus. They just wanted to be left alone and live in equality and be good people. But this film portrays them as bestial, animalistic, lustful. And right, the biggest crime that one could ever commit in the South was a black man who raped a white woman. This was the big crime. And in this movie, that's how blacks are portrayed, as wanting to rape white women. This is what President Wilson said after he saw the movie. It is like writing, It is like writing history with lightning. My only regret is that it is all so terribly true. So, of course, he's saying the North destroyed the South. The KKK were heroes. African Americans are like animals. All these things that the movie says, unfortunately, they're true. Here's a still from the movie. Most of the blacks who were portrayed in the movie were played by whites with black faces. There were some African American actors in the movie, but right, they're playing secondary, third roles. But the main actors are white people with black faces. And this was the case across the board in Hollywood, right? Up until very recently. If you look at John Wayne movies, Native Americans are played by white people with brown faces. It's just ridiculous. It looks really ridiculous now. Here's a clipping I want you to read these. This is a clipping from, where is it from? Western Outlook in 1916. It's about the film being shown in San Francisco and how there's protests. Here's a clipping from the Savannah Tribune about the film being shown in Los Angeles, California. Here's a clipping from Fresno. Here's a local pastor, Reverend Thomas Giffen, who, sorry, it's not Griffin. Here's a typo, Griffin. His name is actually Giffen. And he gives his thoughts on the movie. And he's concerned because he says there's some truth in there. This is what he says, that it doesn't portray African Americans in a good light. Sorry, let me go back. Here is a raving review from Fresno. And let me say that in my research, every major city across America, there were protests. The NAACP came out, white pastors who believed in, it was mostly white pastors who were allies with African Americans. Of course, not all white pastors, but the people who are vocal are usually clergymen against the movie. There's protests of white clergy, of the NAACP, but there are no protests in Fresno. None. And the movie is shown over and over again to packed houses. And here is a glowing review of the movie from a Fresno movie critic reviewer. Another glowing review from another person in Fresno. And I'll read this quote I got from this article, review. There are in America today thousands of people who believe that the KKK were a band of marauding murderers who spread terror to the hearts of every community through which their mysterious journeys were taken. These men banded together to save the white people from the consequences of the growing Negro power. Here are a couple ads from the Fresno Republican newspaper. So if you were waking up and reading the paper in September 29th, 1915, you would have seen these two ads at the White Theater showing the Klansmen. Sometimes it's called the Klansman, sometimes it's called the Birth of a Nation. At this time, most often, it's called the Klansman, the name of the book. Later on, and now in our history, we call it the Birth of a Nation. But here is the knight on horseback. Here's a blank advice sheet for the Birth of a Nation that was sent out to theater owners. This is sent out to theater owners when they receive the film, the film reel to show. Look at some of these points that are advised. Look at this right here, this fourth one. Please bear in mind that Negroes must not be admitted to the birth of a nation under any, sorry, it's late, I work late. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning right now. Please bear in mind that Negroes must not be admitted to the birth of a nation under any circumstances. That's powerful, isn't it? Why do you think that caveat is placed there, the fourth point? Please bear in mind that Negroes must not be admitted to the birth of a nation under any circumstances. Why do you think? Well, there would have been fights, right? There would have been fist fights. But Black people were outside protesting, not in Fresno, but across the nation. I think that's pretty amazing. So if you're a student in my class, I want you to watch the movie. It's 3 hours long, yes, but I want you to watch it. If it was a regular class and we weren't on quarantine, we would watch it in class. All right, at YouTube, type in The Birth of a Nation 1915 and watch the film. It's 3 hours long. It's silent, so you can put some music on in the background. Take notes. Think about the questions below. Number one, modern viewers of The Birth of a Nation generally agree that it portrayed African Americans in racial stereotypes and celebrated the development of the KKK after the Civil War. Why did the advice sheets warn theater managers that Negroes must not be admitted? Number two, the NAACP condemned the film as 3 miles of filth. President Woodrow Wilson referred to the movie as history writ with lightning. Compare these two statements. Use evidence from the film or credible movie reviews to support or refute either statement. The advice sheet was issued by Jack Edwards, representative based in Atlanta. Do you think similar warnings were issued to theater managers in northern cities and towns? Explain your response. The film was released in 1915, 50 years after the end of the Civil War in 1865. In what sense is the film a history of events that occurred a whole 2 generations later? Before. Is the film about what occurred during Reconstruction or more about America in 1915? Or perhaps both? Think critically. How are Black men viewed in relation to white women in the film? How are they viewed in relation to Black women? Who are the heroes and who are the villains in the film? Now, I'm not asking you to turn these questions in, but to think about them. They might appear on the test. Here are some original source documents and newspapers from Fresno, 1922. Now, the second wave of the KKK. This is California. Essentially, the KKK was outlawed. It was seen as a bad thing before 1922. And the Kliegel is essentially an evangelist for the KKK who goes out and recruits people. The Kliegel comes to Los Angeles. The Los Angeles Police Department finds out he's there. They raid his hotel room and they confiscate everything there. And what he has in his possession in the hotel room is a membership roll. And on the membership roll are lots of people from Fresno. 240 men. In fact, one of the men that's listed is named Euless. And this week, Fresno City College announced that its ballpark, Euless Park, is going to be renamed because it was named originally after this KKK member. District Attorney announces names on Kliegel's list. 240 men in Fresno, Calwa, Sanger, Lindsay, Kingsburg, and other cities listed. Here are membership cards of Fresno KKK members. See right here, J.M. Euless. The Fresno City College baseball park was named after him. But this week in September 2020, the president of Fresno City College announced today that the name will be changed soon. Let's read this out. This is what the card says, right? I, the undersigned and native-born true and loyal citizens of the United States of America, being a white male Gentile person of temperate habits, sound in mind, and a believer in the tenets of the Christian religion, the maintenance of the white supremacy, the practice of honorable clannishness, and the principles of pure Americanism, do voluntarily, most respectfully, seriously, and unselfishly petition you for citizenship in the invisible empire, Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, and be a charter member of a Klan to be located at Fresno, state of California. I guarantee on my honor to conform strictly to all rules and requirements regulating my naturalization and the continuance of my membership at all times, a strict and loyal obedience to your constitutional authority and to the constitutional and laws and all regulations and usages of the fraternity. The required donation accompanies this petition. Fresno, California. Another interesting um, article from the Fresno Republican. If you look at the 1870 census rolls from Fresno, around 80% of the white people living in the area are from the Confederacy. They're Southerners. After the Civil War, um, many Southerners came out west. They had lost everything. And the Central Valley, Fresno, Visalia, and Bakersfield are areas where they came. Um, around 80%. And here are daughters of the Confederacy in Fresno. The names of daughters whose fathers and grandfathers fought on the side of the Confederacy. Here we go. The 22nd Annual Convention of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, California Division will be held at the Fresno Hotel. Now, interestingly, these are daughters of the Confederacy from all over California. Fresno was a convention hub during this time because it's the center of California. So many organizations and groups are meeting in Fresno. So we see. Miss Tupper, this was a well-known Civil War family whose grandfather was a general in the Civil War. Thomas Darby Sargent, Miss Chester Garfield, Miss Ellison, Miss Daniels, Cummings, all daughters of the Confederacy. I'm going to skip these. You read these on your own. Pretty powerful images. 1925, the KKK marched down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. The organized event brought 25,000 members in full regalia to the city, demonstrating at the height of their power. Here's a postcard. I actually bid on this on eBay. I didn't win the bid. I think that went up to like $200. Powerful imagery, right? The KKK are very active in parades across America in the 20s. And this, no doubt, is a parade car. I don't know, but I'm assuming their fathers or husbands are in the KKK. This is a women's support group, right? A group of KKK supporting young women riding in a parade car in 1920s. By the mid-1920s, the Klan participated heavily in parades across America. Here's one from Bellingham, Washington. So this is the West Coast, right? The Statue of Liberty. They claim to be intense patriots, and the Blood Cross, right? So I should have gone over the Blood Cross with you. Here's the Blood Cross. This is I think the main. There are many symbols that KKK uses, but this is a major symbol. It's on their robes. It's a white cross, and this symbolizes blood purity. Blood purity. Right. The whole idea of blood purity is so fascinating to the history of blood purity, which you can trace it back to early modern Spain, when the Spanish become intensely concerned with the purity of Spanish blood and the tainting with Jewish and Muslim or Arab blood. And this carries over to the New World, to Mexico, and eventually influences the South. Blood purity. So we see these blood crosses on the Klan, right? Here we see the blood cross here. On this float, the cross, the Christian cross, Lady Liberty, the blood cross, the knight on horseback, imitating the Klansman book and the Birth of a Nation. In Fresno, the blood cross. I own this photo. This is from my collection. 1924 Raisin Day Parade. Raisin Day was a huge event throughout most of Fresno early 20th century history. It was the major event in Fresno County, Raisin Day. And every year a Raisin Day princess was chosen. Here is a Raisin Day float with a fraternal organization called the Daughters of Rebecca. Atop a Klan float. This is the blood cross. So this is a KKK supporting float with other fraternal organizations atop the float in a Raisin Day parade in Fresno. The blood cross. This is a fascinating event. In 1924, one of the largest Klan rallies in the 20s, or at least in the California history. There are many major rallies across the nation, but this is one of the largest I've found in my own research. I'm not a top expert. I've done some research on the Klan, and in my own personal research, this is one of the largest rallies I have found. Certainly one of the largest anticipated rallies, right? In 1924, one of the largest Klan rallies in the 20s took place at the Fresno Fairgrounds. Here's an article from the San Bernardino County Sun, April 30th, 1924. The headline reads, Klan predicts 75,000 will join in carnival. Fresno, April 29th. 3 public initiations, a public wedding in which the KKK members will participate, public addresses, and a number of entertainment features will feature the statewide KKK Carnival to be held in Fresno from May 17th to the 20th under the auspices of the Fresno Klan number 20. Between 75,000 and 100,000 Klansmen will attend. Now, this is a huge number. I'm imagining the journalist talked to a Klan leader, and the Klan leader said, we're expecting between 75,000. That's a big number, right? That many didn't show up. A lot did, but 100,000 is a lot. At this time, the population of Fresno was only 40,000. So this Klan leader is expecting more than double. Right? Between 75,000 and 100,000 Klansmen will attend. Local officers estimate more than a dozen clans from all parts of the state have made reservations. A huge fiery cross will be erected in the center of the fairgrounds where the carnival will be held. This is the ad I found in a local newspaper. The wording is amazing. Fiesta. I don't imagine they were taco. There might have been taco trucks. Who knows? In 1924, I already read this. One of the largest Klan rallies in the 20s took place. Here is a large ad taken out in the local Fresno newspaper advertising Klan Fiesta. Fresno Ku Klux Klan statewide fiesta and public ceremonial. Fresno County Fairgrounds tonight, 6:30, and every evening. So this went on for about a week, till May 28th, under the auspices of Fresno Klan 20. Tonight, big Klan wedding, big public ceremonial, monster ceremonial. This reminds me of one of those car ads. Monster, monster, monster. A big sale at Sears or something. Looks special. Look at the bottom. Everybody welcome. I wonder if everybody is welcome. There's some close-ups. Just looking down here. A special surprise kangaroo courts. I've read in other places that this kangaroo court, so there was dancing going on at night, right? People that were having fun, they were dancing. And then they had these agents that would go out and grab people as they were dancing and take them to a court where they were tried. I'm not sure what they were tried for, maybe race mixing, but everyone's having a great time laughing. They're tried, they're convicted, they're put in jail. So this is what the kangaroo courts, everyone's just having a great time. One of the spectacles I read about that took place here was at the racetrack, there was a biplane with a fiery cross on it at night. So there was a fiery cross atop the plane, and he passed back and forth over the crowd, and they oohed and awed the fiery cross on the plane. Wow. And there was weddings and pastors talking about the righteousness of the KKK. Again, a rite of amusement. A rite of music. Klan bands from all over the state, drill teams, old-fashioned dances, quartets, specialty dancers, singers and speakers. Dancers. Have you ever seen what dancing looks like without any Black influence? It's kind of funny. Everybody welcomed. Big Fiesta is being graced by the presence of Imperial Representative Captain G.W. Price. This monstrous fiesta and frolic is being staged and directed by Stanley Dewar. Ceremony is directed by H.C. Quick, who officiated at the Oakland Auditorium. See, Oakland is another hotbed. Fresno, Oakland, Bakersfield, Anaheim, Long Beach, they're all hotbeds for Klan activity. America First. That slogan has been used throughout American history by anti-immigrant leaders, by racists. Of course, everyone who lives in America believes in America. I believe in America. I love the ideas that the founding fathers put forth and planted the seeds for equality for all that eventually grew into this great tree of freedom. And there's things that need to be worked out, but I believe in America. But this phrase itself, America First, has often been used by racist anti-immigrant groups, right? And unfortunately, it's a phrase that our president uses. This has a deep-seated history in the past with racist groups. Black leaders during this time, right? We can't just talk about the oppression. We have to talk about men and women who rose above. One person I want you to know is Booker T. Washington. I want you to read this on your own about his life. Time doesn't permit me to read all of this, but he's one of the leading spokesmen of African Americans during this time period. I'll read this. He taught that economic success for Blacks would take time. And he was controversial. Not all African American leaders, many criticized him for his take. He believed that African Americans during this time shouldn't clamor for equality at high places. They shouldn't run for office. They shouldn't want it to skyrocket into elite positions at universities. That they should prove themselves first as good working class Americans. They should get jobs in industry, work in factories, and perhaps later, after a few generations go by, after they prove themselves to white Americans that they are good citizens, then they will be accepted into higher echelons of society. This angered a lot of leaders, especially leaders in the NAACP, like Du Bois, as we'll see in the next few slides. He taught that subordination to whites was a necessary evil until African Americans could prove they were worthy of full economic and political rights. He believed that if African Americans worked hard and obtained financial independence and cultural advancement, they would eventually win acceptance and respect from the white community. Now, I want you to go to this link or type in Atlanta Compromise in YouTube, and I want you to take notes. I'll read this out. This is what he says. He gives his famous speech at Atlanta in a convention to a group of white leaders about African Americans. And this is what he says in his speech. The wisest among my race understand that the agitation of questions of social equality is the extremist folly. So he's calling African Americans who want to be equal on all levels, he's calling them extremists. And he says, and the progress in the enjoyment of all the privileges that will come to us must be the results of severe and constant struggle rather than artificial forcing. Right? No race that has anything to contribute to the markets of the world is long in any degree ostracized. He's saying, we have a lot to offer. And we won't be oppressed for long because eventually whites are going to see that we're pretty awesome. We work hard, we're good people, we go to church, we believe in Jesus. We're going to get up in the morning and work 15 hours a day. And we're going to show people that we're awesome American citizens. And then they're going to accept us and then we can go up in society. But he's saying, but there's lots of blacks who are forcing it. We haven't been accepted by whites, so you can't force it. Right? And this angers a lot of black leaders who say, hey man, you're preaching oppression, right? We're free. We should be able to go anywhere and be anything we want to as free American citizens. And this, he goes on, he says, it is important and right that all privileges of the law be ours, but it is vastly more important that we be prepared for the exercise of these privileges. The opportunity to earn $1 in a factory just now is worth infinitely more than the opportunity to spend $1 in the opera house. Wow. So he wants blacks to prove themselves as good, solid, hardworking, working class Americans. He's saying earning that dollar in the factory means more, way more, than getting dressed up in a fur coat, acting like a white person, going to the opera house, and pretending you're equal when you're not, because the whites have not accepted you yet. This is what he's saying, right? In his vision, he has a vision for America that eventually, right, all things will be equal. But he's saying from his perspective that first blacks need to prove themselves. This is what he's saying. Now, other leaders disagree with him. But Booker T. Washington built a university, the Tuskegee Institute. He's not just saying things. He's not just giving speeches. He's actually putting it into practice. He's educating black people. He's giving them skills. Here's a history class at his university. You hear it right? Lincoln, Washington. Who's that over there? Is that Buchanan? I don't know. But definitely Lincoln and Washington. He's educating young black people. Here's his university. Booker T. Washington created this university. It's called the Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute. Now, normal schools, you often see colleges referred as normal schools. That a normal school is what trained teachers. This is where teachers are trained. Beautiful campus. This is the campus that Booker T. Washington built. He's not just saying things, right? He has a vision for African Americans, but it's at odds with the vision that many other African Americans have, especially Du Bois. I'll let you read most of this, but I'll go down here. He publicly opposed Booker T. Washington's Atlanta Compromise, which taught that vocational education for blacks was more valuable than higher education or political office. He also criticized Booker T for not demanding equality for blacks. Evidently, he died one day before Martin Luther King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. I'll let you read this. I want you to read it. It's very important. Great read. The Great Migration, 1915 and 1916. This is when many African Americans leave the South. Why do they leave the South? Well, groups like the KKK are terrorizing them. They're oppressed by Jim Crow laws. They're being pushed out for that reason, right? We know from our immigration lecture that there are factors pushing people out when they migrate or immigrate, and factors pulling them to a new place. So they're being pushed out by terrorism, by unfair, unjust laws and legal structure, and no work. And they're being pulled to places like Chicago, Oakland, Los Angeles, because there are jobs, because there is less oppression and more freedom and less KKK. Now remember, the KKK is in Fresno. It is involved in politics. When the membership roll was found in 1924, the Kliegel list, most of the police department in Fresno is on that list. A great number of firefighters also. So the KKK and white supremacy is all over Fresno, but I haven't found an instance of lynching. That doesn't mean that they're not beating blacks on the street, right? If the police are KKK, you can imagine the treatment that Mexicans and blacks are receiving by the hands of these police officers. It's weird to say the KKK is less oppressive here than it is in Alabama, where blacks are being lynched. But it is different, a different KKK in Fresno. The KKK in Fresno was very involved in prohibition, right? They're helping the feds smash stills across the county and bring violators to jail. And they really try to portray themselves as being righteous Christians in the Central Valley of California, right? They don't drink alcohol. They go to church. They believe in Jesus, but they believe in white supremacy too. Well, that concludes our lecture on the KKK and the Jim Crow era.